Okay, good morning everyone. Today I'll be going through your practice paper, and in this video we'll be going through case study 1, the answers for case study 1. Okay, so this case study is essentially about fracking. It's a microeconomics case study. Fracking is this new technology that the US has developed to be able to extract oil or natural gas from the rocks. Okay, it's a new way of drilling. All right, so we'll first go through the first question, A part 1. Compare the price of oil relative to the price of natural gas in 2012 with that in 1993. So you can see that overall there has been an increase because in 1993 the price of oil relative to the price of natural gas is only like, let's say, 6 or 7. Okay, on the other hand, the price of oil relative to the price of natural gas is about 33.4, which means that the price of oil in 2012 it was about 33 times that of the price of natural gas. So if you look at the answers have been sent to you via tvjc.sg by Miss Lim. Okay, can you please refer to the answers? Okay, so you can see when they ask you compare, you give me the difference. Okay, the price of oil relative to the price of natural gas was definitely higher in 2012 as compared to 1993. I just need the first statement. You don't have to tell me that it is 5.6 times higher as compared to 1993. It's fine. Okay, just give me the first line. Now let's move on. A part 2. How could this difference be explained given the increase in the production of both commodities? Now, boys and girls, by now you should know that for econs, you need to pick the right analysis tool to do your work, to do the question. Okay, and in this case, the right analysis tool you need to pick would be that of demand and supply. All right, because it can explain why in 1993 the price of oil, it can explain why in 2012 the price of oil relative to natural gas is so much higher as compared to 1993. Okay, so use the analysis tool of demand and supply and you'll find it easy. Okay, so basically for oil the demand has increased, right? You can see here that the increase in demand for oil could be due to rapid industrialization. It is mentioned in the extract that there's industrialization in countries like Asian countries like China. Therefore, the demand increases by a very large extent, actually very significantly. Okay, at the same time, USA produces more oil using fracking, resulting in an increase in supply of oil as well. So, in other words, for oil, okay, supply increase, demand increases as well. Okay, just that probably the demand increased more than the supply, right? Next, we will talk about natural gas. Okay, so for natural gas, on the other hand, okay, the supply of natural gas also increases because this is mentioned in the extract. They talk about it how in extract 1 it was mentioned that there was an increase in supply of natural gas by the US, and at the same time there's no mention of an increase in demand for natural gas, so we assume that the demand remains constant, largely constant. Okay, and therefore you come up with these two diagrams. You see, boys and girls, this is the diagram for the price of oil, this is the diagram for the price of natural gas, and you can see that the demand for natural gas increases because of the industrialization. Okay, and the supply increases for natural gas. Price of oil increases. The demand for oil increases because of the industrialization. The supply also increases as well because via fracking more oil can be produced. At the same time, for natural gas, this increase in supply is also due to fracking. all right, and we assume that the demand remains constant. So when that happens, you see that, hey, the price of oil has increased and the price of natural gas has actually fallen. So definitely the price of oil relative to the price of natural gas would definitely increase over time, because oil is going up, natural gas is dropping, the price of natural gas is dropping. Okay, so if you put the two effects together, you will see that they both contribute to an increase in the price of oil relative to the price of natural gas. Okay, so I repeat that the full answers have already been given to you. They have been sent to you via tpjc.sg by Ms. Lim. Okay. Next, let's talk about this question. Explain the likely impact on the OPEC cartel and its individual members following the increased production of oil as a result of the fracking boom. Now, I think one important thing is that you need to take note that this OPEC cartel is something like a firm. We see it like a firm. And when we talk about impact, let's think aloud right now, okay? Think aloud. When we talk about impact of a firm, we usually think about the profits, right? The profits. We can consider the revenue and the cost, okay? And therefore the profits. So that would be the impact on the firm, right? On the other hand, impact on its individual members. And this is important that you know that the members are actually countries. And when we think about impacts, the macroeconomic impacts on countries, we usually think about the macro goals, okay, like EG, sustained EG, and so on. So when there is an increase in the production of oil by the US, you know that it is going to confirm it's going to affect OPEC, right? Okay, I'm still thinking aloud. I'm thinking aloud right now. Okay, it seems to me that the goods that they produce are kind of like substitutes for each other, right? So actually, here they didn't like draw the graph, but actually what I suggest you should do would be that you draw the MRAR MC graph, okay? So you see what happens is that initially this is the MR, this would be the AR and this would be the MR, right? But what happens is that with more production of oil by the US companies who are using fracking now, okay, you can say that the demand for OPEC's oil will actually fall to AR1, okay, and MR1 will follow suit. So you can see that there is a parallel shift. Okay, you can see that demand for the firm's product actually falls. Now, when do I use this kind of graph? You use this kind of graph only when you want to talk about the effect on the firm's demand, okay, or cost, all right? When do we use demand and supply? Demand and supply is used when we are talking about the market as a whole, not a particular firm, but a market. This one is about a particular firm. Okay, so this is when you use a graph like that. It's for firms, not the market, all right? So I think it is not here, but what I would prefer you to have done would actually be to draw this graph, okay, complete with the MC, AC curves, to show me that the profits of OPEC would actually fall. It would fall. The level of supernormal profits that it would be earning would fall, and this is something that I've taught you in class, right? To shift the demand for OPEC's oil, shift it to the left, okay, like what I did here. Shift it to the left, and then you add in the AC and the MC curves and show that the level of supernormal profits fall. Okay, I think that's important. Now, so this is how I address the part on the OPEC cartel, that recognizing that OPEC cartel is a firm and the demand for the firm's product has fallen, causing its profits to fall. Now, the next part would be on the individual members. Okay, just take note that since OPEC's supernormal profits fall, right? Okay, so definitely what it also means to the individual members would be that that their export revenue will fall because countries like, let's say, Saudi Arabia, okay, is part of OPEC, right? If the demand for its products fall, if its profits fall, for the cartel as a whole, it also means that Saudi Arabia's export revenue is falling because it's earning less profits from its oil. Its export revenue will fall, and therefore, assuming that OPEC members' economies are operating on the Keynesian range of the AS curve, you can use the intermediate range as well. I'm fine with it. But assuming I think that this is an assumption that we often forget about, the assumption of the intermediate or the Keynesian range, all right? You need to ensure that you tell me that that there's a fall in the export revenue for OPEC members, like, let's say, Saudi Arabia. Okay, and therefore, when the X falls, the X minus M falls. Okay, and then the AD falls. Okay, I don't need you to do the iPony thing because I don't think that you have time. You don't need to do iPony, okay? You just need to tell me that the AD falls, the real national income falls, and therefore this would limit EG. Okay, I think that all these things are important. Limit EG for all these OPEC countries, and at the same time, since the X minus M falls, okay, you can talk about the current account, you can talk about the BOP, that the current account worsens, the BOP worsens. Now take note that the balance of trade here that they are talking about is about the same meaning as current account. You can take it as a current account. When we use the word balance of trade, it could mean the current account. Okay, so that's about it. I repeat that for this question, I'm thinking aloud. Okay, that when you talk about OPEC cartel, it seems to me to be like a firm. You need to link back to profits of the firm. Therefore, I expect that you draw the demand for the firm's product falling. You can also make it more elastic if you want to, all right, for this particular case. And at the same time, more elastic because there are more close substitutes right now, right? And individual members, we're actually talking about the countries, individual countries of OPEC, and therefore there's a need to link to the macro goals. Okay, now let's move on to, oh yes, please draw the graph as well. I don't need the iPony. I don't need it. I just need you to tell me that AD falls, real national income falls, limits EG, and at the same time that cyclical unemployment increases. I don't need the iPony, but I need the graph. Okay, this is important. Now next, let's move on to the next question on C. Compare the likely barriers to entry facing potential entrants to guar farming with those to oil production by fracking. Actually, for this question, this compare question, you can give me similarities, but it is not the important thing. The key thing is actually the difference. You need to give me the difference between the kind of barriers to entry faced by the guar farmers as opposed to fracking. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious that you need to tell me that those oil, okay, there are more barriers to entry for companies that are interested in fracking, definitely higher, because with fracking, we're talking about technology here. We're talking about heavy machinery that is used to get the oil out from the rocks. And I think instead of starting off like that, I would prefer that this be your starting sentence, that the barriers, and this is the most important line for this whole question, which I thought that should come first, that the barriers to entry facing potential entrants to guar farming is weaker than that for fracking. The barriers to entry for fracking is definitely much higher. Okay, so one reason it could be because of the EOS, right? Why the companies interested in fracking, they face a high barrier to entry? It could be the EOS because of the large capital outlay. Okay, very high startup costs, very expensive machinery that they need to buy, and therefore they reap a lot of internal EOS. Right, all these firms that are currently in the market, they have a lot of EOS, they reap a lot of internal EOS. Okay, on the other hand, the guar farmer is unlikely to enjoy much EOS due to the small scale of the crops. Okay, because they produce much less, they are likely to enjoy much less EOS. Okay, another point would be on the startup cost. It's a bit related to the EOS point, but you can see it as another point that fracking requires high capital expenditure, a lot of machines that need to be bought. You need a lot of skilled labor. All right, so definitely very obvious. Okay, I won't talk about the government regulation one, but very obvious that the barriers to entry for one is definitely much higher than the other. I think, boys and girls, you focus on answering the question. Why are the barriers to entry different? Definitely one is higher than the other. I thought that is the key point. Okay, and you give examples, you refer to the extract. Okay, next, for part D, to what extent is the fracking boom likely to lead to long-term improvement in the standard of living? Boys and girls, I'm thinking a lot right now. When I see the word standard of living, I think about material and the non-material aspect of standard of living. And this is something that must come out. It must come out in your answer. It must come out. All right? Even if you feel that you can only make a link to material aspect of standard of living, somehow you must in your answer try to link to non-material aspect as well. If not, that will curtail the kind of marks that you're going to get. Okay, so to what extent is it likely to lead to long-term improvement in the standard of living, right? So, and again, when we talk about to what extent questions, please address the word to what extent. And I've given you some sentence starters on to what extent before, right? That the extent may not be so great because blah, 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 right? Or the extent of this may be limited because, or if you can use the word either if or because, right? So I think that in the introduction for 8 marks, you need an introduction, take note, for 8 marks questions, okay? Just a very short 2-line introduction. I would definitely talk about how you should, I would definitely bring in some kind of framework for my overall essay, which talks about the material and the non-material aspect of standard of living. And then I'll go on to talk about it, right? I would say, that definitely it definitely leads to an improvement in standard of living, okay? And I would say, that because of fracking, you need more gua, which is a raw material that is used in fracking, right? So demand increase, okay, basically the TR, okay, the markings have not come out clearly, but basically the TR will increase from this box, okay, the blue box to the red box, all right? Okay, so definitely demand increase and therefore the TR increases. Okay, and when TR increases, more profits increase, and therefore another word I would expect is that profits increase, incomes increase. Is like the incomes of the farmers increasing, right? Okay, farmers able to consume more goods and services, more and better quality goods and services, and therefore I would say that is the material aspect of standard of living improves. I would say that. Okay, next let's go on to the antithesis that the fracking boom does not lead to a long-term improvement in the standard of living of Goa farmers. Okay, you see, they talk about how in extract 3 it's mentioned that companies are moving resources into developing synthetic alternatives. Boys and girls, you see, you're right. Many of you did talk about this point, but what I would have required was that you use some kind of demand and supply analysis, or if it is also not wrong. Okay, so this one is from the market's point of view. For this case, it is also not wrong if you want to talk about each individual guava farmer, and therefore you talk about you use the MR and AR framework. You talk about AR shifting left, okay? Just that this one is a bit faster. So demand of guar will shift leftwards. It will demand for guar will fall. And therefore the profit, TR profits, okay, would all fall. And therefore the material aspect of standard of living may not increase for the farmers in the long run. Okay, and I also thought that that this part about how with guar, because farmers are earning super normal profits, I thought it's important to say that they are facing competition. You know why? Because it's an MPC market for sure. It's a monopolistically competitive market. And I thought that one important word that is not here would be that of supernormal profits. These farmers are earning supernormal profits in the short run, and definitely they're going to attract new firms into the industry. All right, and therefore the supply of guar will increase and the price of guar will fall. Okay, so what happens is that you can tell me as the price falls, they will make less profits as well. Okay, and therefore you link back to the SOL. Okay, link back to the SOL. Okay, okay, the analysis here is quite it's a bit more challenging. They actually talk about how with since the supply of guar increases, the analysis here is a bit more challenging, because what they did was to put the demand and supply shift together, that since the demand falls and at the same time the supply of guar increases, right, because you're attracting new firms into the industry, what they did was that they actually put the two shifts together and they said that the supply shift, the one about attracting more firms to enter the industry, supply would definitely increase less than the fall in demand, because it takes time for crops to grow. I think that is the point that they're trying to make. It takes time for the crops to mature, and therefore the fall in demand is greater than the increase in supply. Now, I don't need you to do this kind of analysis. It's a bit complicated. You can do it separately. You can talk about a fall in demand, and then you can talk about increase in supply. That's also fine with me, all right? And I think, in the beginning of this question, I did talk about how it is so important that you somehow link back to the non-material aspect of standard of living. And I see that some of you have tried your best to link back, and that was a good try. Okay, but I thought that one possible way to link, very good way to link, would be that of global warming. Would be about would be about global warming and climate change, and how, if with more fracking, there's more pollution, there's more climate change, and therefore there will be more incidents of floods, hurricanes, and storms. This is one possible way to link that. Because of that, this would affect the material aspect of standard of living, right? But with regards to non-material, this puts immense pressure and stress of farmers with the unstable weather conditions, because of all these pollution that is a result of the fracking, that they are contributing to. It will place more stress on them because the weather conditions are bad. All right, it will lead to a lower non-material standard of living, non-material aspect of standard of living. So it's a matter of stress, right? With more fracking, worse climate change, what happens is that they might be concerned about the loss of income, and therefore the material aspect of standard of living might worsen. For the conclusion, I think, as I said, all you need to do is kind of like state your stand and give other clever comments. So here my conclusion is that it is not likely to lead to a long-term improvement to a large extent. Okay, in the short run, probably their incomes will increase and so on. And some of you in your essay, what you did was you skipped the short run analysis and you straight away went to the long run, which I thought was inappropriate, because in order to get to the long run part, you need to tell me first what happens in the short run. Okay, so in the future, please don't skip the short run, all right? Now, next, then, okay, why will it not lead to a long-term improvement? That's the question, right? Well, because chances are more companies would try to develop synthetic alternatives. More guava farmers will be attracted to supernormal profits, and this will erode the supernormal profits in the long run, right? So, it really depends on whether companies are able to successfully develop synthetic alternatives to guava, and whether these other or regions or other guava farmers will be able to successfully produce guava crops. It really depends on that, on whether they have the right, on whether those countries are able to develop synthetic alternatives, whether they can find the right technology to produce alternatives to guava, right? So so I don't want to go on. You can read the rest of the answers yourself. Okay, for part E, I don't want to talk a lot about part E, okay? I think you read the answers, but I think for part E, it is obviously a market failure question, because they talk about economic inefficiencies in resource allocation. Okay, and for many of you, you have not read your market failure yet, okay? All of you wrote about market dominance. Please. Market failure, there are many sources of market failure. Okay, there are many sources of market failure, and one possible source would be that of market dominance. I agree, but for this case, it is just completely wrong. In the exam, what you need to do is that you need to go through all the sources of market failure in your mind and ask yourself which is the most appropriate one. Given that there's an increased extraction of fossil fuels, I thought it's pretty obvious that this would be obviously talking about negative externalities. Because it's very obvious in the extract that they talk about how there would be some kind of pollution, there would be some kind of climate change, right? And therefore, definitely, the key problem here would be that of negative externalities. This is the source of market failure, which leads to economic inefficiencies in resource allocation, which means that the right amount is not being produced. There is overproduction, okay, of oil by fracking. There's an overproduction of oil or natural gas by fracking. So overproduction means that you're not allocating your resources efficiently, okay? So for this question, the main reason why most of you got 0 was because you could not identify that the source of market failure here is negative externalities. And then I think most appropriate policy option, I think you need to give, what you need to do would be you need to give 2 policy options at least. All right. Wait, before that, for this 10 marks question, I think what you need to do is you need to first explain the problem. You need to give me the problem policy framework. Okay, the problem policy framework, where you first explain the problem of negative externalities. If you don't have time to draw the graph, I'm fine with it, okay, for the problem part. But I think for the policies part, I thought that definitely, okay, this is the problem part, right? But I thought that for the policy part, you could have talked about subsidies, okay, how subsidies have been provided by the government there. Subsidies can be given for renewable energy, right? To get producers to switch away from fracking towards renewable energy. You subsidize renewable energy. Okay, so you draw the graph, okay, and you draw graph, and of course you explain the graph, which I'm not going to go through one by one. This is from the lecture notes, okay, on how subsidies can work, all right, to get people to switch towards using renewable energy, which has some kind of positive externality because it helps to reduce the amount of pollution in society, in the country, right? And of course, boys and girls, when you give me a policy, of course you must evaluate the policy. You need to evaluate the policy, and I won't go through all the evaluation. And the next one, I thought that another policy you can talk about would be that of legislation, how legislation works, okay? And some of you even talk about tradable pollution permits. Well, possible, okay? Legislation might be a bit easier to explain. And you know, when they give legislation, right, they don't just give all the points from the lecture notes without application. You provide application. For example, you must apply for licenses and planning permission to extract the fossil fuels, okay? Okay, there might be certain requirements related to the drilling, cementing and plugging of oil and gas wells, as well as protection of water supplies, you know, things that are applicable. And there's no point just telling me that you can use legislation, but you need to tell me exactly what laws, okay? Be very specific about it. Answer the question. Don't just give me all the theory, okay? And of course, you give me the evaluation of legislation, which can include high administrative costs, okay? There are so many fracking firms in the country, right? It might incur a lot of high admin costs to track that everyone is indeed keeping to the law. So for this question, you just need to give me two policies. And I think for the overall evaluation, what you need to do is you need to answer the question, you see. The question is about the most appropriate policy option, which means that at the very end, you need to provide me a judgment on which one you think could be the best. I think that is, other than, okay, I know that I say you can give clever comments as a whole, but, you know, when they ask you for which is the best, then you better answer the question and tell them which is the best. So for this, what they did was they said that subsidy for renewable fuel tackles the root of the problem by reducing the demand for fossil fuel. Okay, it is more effective in the long run. Legislation is more a short run measure. So a lot of the times you can talk about short run versus long run. Okay, you can talk about that, right? And when you tell me that and of course you can talk about the combination of policy, but I think, you know, that when they ask you, every time they ask you which is the more appropriate, which is the better policy, you need to have a stand. You better have a stand. Anything that answers the question is fine. Just have a stand to tell me why one may be better than the other. After that, then you can bring in other things like combination of policies, government failure, and so on. Okay, you can always talk about government failure, right? Okay, so, you know, I'm giving you some examples of how to apply to the context. You see, you don't just memorize the thing, all right? You just, you know, when you talk about bureaucracy and red tape, whatever you write, try to ground it in reality and say, you know, for example, we're talking about the US Congress, right? I mean, fracking is most often done in the US. Say that, hey, that, you know, the US Congress has some kind of a history where there is a lot of bureaucracy. It takes some time for them to discuss, and it takes some time for them to actually implement the laws. So, which has been happening in the United States for some time. You know, you apply the context. Whatever you write, try to ground it in reality. Try to ground it in reality. Okay, it's not just about the theory, it's how you use the theory to apply to the real world. To show that you really know something about your real world, the real world. Alright, so I won't say any more about CS1. Okay, this is the end of the video for case study 1. Alright, I hope that you have learned from this video lesson. Thank you.